Well then folks, here's something a bit different, a bit more of a Let's Play style, like I said. Hopefully the audio and everything syncs up okay. So I've already purchased the power pack. It's 25 quid here in the UK, 24.99 technically. I've got the audio set fairly low, so hopefully it shouldn't interfere with the microphone. And basically this will be like an ongoing review as I play it. So I don't know how many episodes this would be. I don't know if I'll edit it down or do it in real time. We'll have to see. So it's 50 events, 37 rewards apparently. We know the 6 vehicles basically that are in there. Presumably a lot of cash to come from it, I guess. I don't know. I've got the 5 mil added already. Not that that makes a huge difference when you've already got, however much we've each got in the game anyway. So we've got Civic, FF Battle, Hakors. Is it Hakorsk? How do you say it again? Hakska? Something like that. I can't remember now. Porsche Cup and American Muscle. You know me, we've got to go with Muscle first. So American Muscle cars. GTI. Okay. Right, okay, so this is... Yeah, I get what it's doing then. So I thought this was like races under that subsection, so it's like more and more and more. So it's just zooming in on that part. Okay, cool. American Muscle... Let's give it a go. Camaro. Which one do we want? 700 points, 680 points, 690 points. And you pay to enter an event. That's a bit of a weird thing. Well, you get more cash, so let's go with that. And I'll probably cut out, like menu screens and stuff like that. So, practice first of all. I wonder if this is like a timed thing. Welcome, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Practice as long as time allows. Okay, so what's the info that we've got? Practice in progress, an hour. Okay, well, plenty of time, I guess. Go to the track, travel speed. Okay, so kind of B-spec style. You can speed it up, spectate, settings, end practice. Okay, so you can skip. Let's increase the travel speed, see what kind of laps they get. Or at least what kind of laps some of them get. Still getting over the gold. And what is, of course, the longest pit lane in the world when you're waiting to come out of it. No traction. So it looks like it basically keeps, I would imagine, whatever settings you've already got in the main game. If traction control's turned off, I would assume so. It's been ages since I drove the Mach 40. And I know for Let's Plays, technically you're supposed to be talking all the time, but it's not really my style. There's a reason why I don't do Let's Plays. Don't know about you guys, but I'm one of those people that I tend to be funnier when I'm not trying to be. And I feel like for Let's Plays, you've kind of got to have that comedic spark most of the time, otherwise what's the point? Which is why this particular Let's Play is a bit more of a review, really. Kind of a real-time review, I guess you could call it, where you can see a lot more detail. So, for example, when like 1.65 dropped, Spec 3, I review the entire thing. It took me the whole day, obviously, to take a look at the new update, as it would for all of you as well, at least a day. And then condense all of those thoughts down into what ends up being a 17-minute video. And I guess I could technically use some of this time to talk about channel-related stuff as well, because I do get asked sometimes by people, what advice do I have for newer channels, people starting out YouTube, especially these days? It's hard for me to give advice in that kind of way, but I guess I could use this as also a kind of podcast style time to talk about behind the scenes stuff like that. So for that review, for example, when I first recorded it was a 27-minute video. And for those of you who don't know, I know some of you already do know, I don't use scripts for videos, I just talk. And the advantage of that is it means that no matter how long the initial audio recording is, the video itself is always going to be shorter than that, because I like to cut out breaths as much as possible while preserving the flow, all that kind of stuff. And there's one piece of advice that you'll hear from a lot of YouTubers and a lot of channels, which is very, very good advice, and that is audio is king. Everyone goes on about graphics, everyone assumes that you need a really good camera, really good this, really good that. Well, as some of you will remember, I was going to say many, but some of you will remember, back when I first got started on this channel, I literally had an iPhone 4 at the time on a stack of VHS tapes in my kitchen, recording on the top of, I think we'll continue that conversation in a second. Okay, end the practice, that'll do for now. Qualifier 10 minutes. Okay. I don't really mind, to be honest, if I end up second on the grid. Whatever, really. Blah, 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 blah. Compared to the practice, it's shorter. Yeah, we know. I wonder, and I guess we'll probably find this out moving forward, if the qualifying time varies depending on the track. Because if it is 10 minutes no matter what, then if, for example, you've got a Nürburgring event, which I'm sure there are some in here, it could be a bit of a pain to try and do a decent couple of laps, especially if the first one's a red lap because you're leaving the pits. But I guess we'll wait and see about that later on. So to go back to what I was saying, audio is king. And on those older videos, one of the reasons why I hate it is because the sound is so bad. It's super tinny. I hate my voice back then. I weighed more as well, which puts a different stress on your vocal cords and makes you sound worse. It's why I sound weird right now, because I'm getting over a cold and it affects your vocal cords. But yeah, if you're starting out on a channel, Gran Turismo or anything really, audio is more important than visual. You can have a video that looks absolutely rubbish, like a 8-bit pixel video, but if it sounds crisp, clear, or at least understandable, you're going to have more people sticking around. Whereas if you've got a video that sounds like a blown out speaker, people just, you know, they're not going to stick around for that unless it's some kind of weird ASMR, I guess. And if you look back to some of the real OG videos on the channel, such as, for example, when I got started with stuff like Goodwood videos, and again, no commentary, like cheats and glitches in games like Midnight Club, etc., back in the day. Those videos, I don't know why, but my camera used to sound horrific back then. It would make like a printer noise for some reason. I really don't understand why. I guess it was just a not very good camera, but those videos are almost unwatchable. And it's not even because of the visuals. The visuals aren't great, but if you turn the audio off, you can kind of get through it. But they sound so bad that they just make the videos even worse. So stuff like that, that's the kind of advice I give to smaller channels in terms of, you know, oh, what's your setup and stuff like that. Like, your setup doesn't really matter that much. It does eventually, you know, but when you get started, the most important things on YouTube are basically the same piece of advice that I give to everyone, which is when you're getting started, you need to have 2 things in mind. Or, well, let's say 3. Number 1 is the most important, even though it seems the least important, and that is, don't put your hopes on it. I certainly didn't 16 years ago, or however long it was when I technically made the channel, in 2009. And if I'd have started it now, even more so, it's a lot more difficult than it was back then. So don't put your hopes on it. Don't expect to be making a living off of YouTube overnight, or even over a year. Just do it because you enjoy it. Do it on the side. Do it for some pocket money even, initially. And if it gets good, good. If it doesn't, then, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's even what I do right now. You know, technically this is my job, but I earn more money now outside of YouTube than I do from this channel. It shouldn't be that way, but it's because of how bad the algorithm is, and that's just how it has to be. So diversify your portfolio, as the tech bros and stuff would like to say, actually is one of the very few things they say that is true. You do need to diversify what you do. And aside from that, I think I'll just finish this 1 lap, as I almost got a red lap then, and leave it at that, I think, for the qualifying. I think that might be slower than I did in practice. I can't remember, but that will do. So let's return to the pits. I've got a little bit of drift on this controller. Typical PlayStation. New fastest lap. Okay, whatever. So I'm dropping down. Ooh, it's crazy how much I'm dropping down. Okay, so I'm in 5th. I'm curious to know how much of the Sophie AI is involved at this stage, or if it ramps up by itself, or do you have to actually change it? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, still 5th for now. No, I don't want to retire. Okay, well, that's good to know. Don't press retire, I guess, because I assume that would just skip forward to the race, but I guess not. So this reminds me a little bit more of sport mode, which obviously is kind of what they were going for. I still find it funny in the trailer how they were trying to make this sound like a big deal. You know, it's basically just a more in-depth version of career mode. And I'm pretty sure games like Tokka Race Driver 3 were doing this years and years ago. Or, you know, not necessarily this exact idea, but stuff which really takes it seriously. Class versus class racing, sticking to, like, the qualifier and practice and all that kind of stuff. It's hardly the first game to do it. Qualifier ended. And I'm 5th on the grid. Sure, whatever. It is going to be interesting to see how I do the rest of the series, because don't make any mistake, blah, 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 blah. Okay. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I was saying about when I did that, my story through sport mode. I think it ended up being a five or 6 part series, I think it was, and that was super condensed down. So I might end up doing that for this, because I feel like probably most of you aren't going to be that interested in seeing every single race. So for this one, I think we'll take it a little bit slower, and then you can let me know in the comments when this is released. Do you want to continue in this kind of real-time format, where you literally watch me play the entire thing, which, you know, I'm fine with doing that, it's certainly easier for me on editing, or do you want to have like a cut-down version? I'm not exactly sure how I would do a cut-down version, because highlights, you know, a race is a race is a race, I guess, but yeah, let me know, I guess. And I do prefer this format to live streaming, because at least then if I do need to cut out, you know, if I have to step away, or if I get a call, or whatever else, then at least that doesn't matter too much. And I guess I do also need to bear in mind that I chose the car which was the higher challenge of the 3, but yeah, whatever. I'm curious to see as well as we progress through, are they going to be like proper endurance races? Because I seem to recall them saying something about having 24-hour races back, but I can't remember now if that was that part of the power pack, or were they talking about that in the main game? I can't remember now. It would be appropriate, I guess, to be part of the power pack, and that would be a very interesting episode of the series. And I do get asked every so often, how do I play? So you can see partially now how I play. I like minimal ABS, but I do like a little bit. No traction control. I like chase cam in most circumstances. There are some cars that I don't. I tend to drive a bit better in some prototype cars, especially the LMP 900 kind of era, so it doesn't really apply in this game. And Formula cars in particular I find better in, to be honest, not even cockpit cam, usually more so like nose cone cam, if you will. But yeah, I usually drive in chase cam, and I've said some of the reasons why before. I personally like the vibe in chase cam. It's what I grew up with, especially in older games where you didn't even have cockpit cam, so it's kind of what I'm used to. And also because at the end of the day, I am a car enthusiast first and a racing game enthusiast second, and that is a big distinction to make. I feel like a lot of the Gran Turismo community is possibly the opposite. They seem to really enjoy the racing online with real people, and, you know, trying to be good enough to go to the live events. I mean, when I say that I'm not interested in that, I honestly mean I'm not interested. And it's not one of those cope things where it's like, well, actually, he knows he's not quick enough, so he knows he'll never be there. If I was the fastest player in the world, I could snap my fingers and just beat everyone. I still wouldn't care, because I just don't care about racing. Racing to me is a means to an end to enjoy cool innovation and cool cars. I don't care about the drivers, I don't care about teams more often than not. So yeah, it just doesn't really do it for me. I like watching other people race, but for me, it's just not my vibe. So in a game, that's another reason why I prefer stuff like using the auto box, or driving in chase cam and doing unsportsmanlike behaviour like that. Yeah, I like looking at the car, you know? It's part of the enjoyment of it, and again, I'm sure it's partially because of growing up with chase cam all the time. I would be curious to know how many of my similar aged compadres, because I'm 31, how many of you growing up were similar with games? How many of you still drive in chase cam, maybe for those reasons, or how many of you who are maybe even the same age or older now prefer cockpit cam? I know some people prefer a wheel because they find it more realistic. Some people prefer VR because it's more realistic. Some people, you know, prefer a manual gearbox because it's quicker. Others prefer it because, again, realism. For me, I like the auto box because of two things. One, now that I do drive, because it's my preferred way of driving in real life. I've owned, 20 vehicles now, and out of those, 2 of them were bikes anyway, but out of all the cars, I've only had one that was a manual. And it was a great little manual, but I just have no real need for manuals in my life. And secondly, because, again, I grew up driving auto in games, because, especially in arcade games, you know, Need for Speeds and stuff, you never really need to use a manual gearbox in those kind of games. Even if you have the option of it, it tends to be fairly rare. Like, what was it, back in, I think it was Underground 1 and 2, you had to drive manual for the drag racing, I think it was, if I recall correctly. And that was cool, because it made the race a bit more interesting than just, you know, add a turbo and now you're going to automatically win. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out, because I was thinking of maybe doing, obviously before I did any actual gameplay, like an hour episode each time and then see how long it takes, but I don't know if you guys would necessarily have the appetite to do an hour of this every single time. Again, let me know. Maybe some of you like the longer form thing. I know some people like watching stuff like this just to kind of have something on in the background. I do that quite a lot, to be honest. Just mine tends to ironically be nothing to do with cars or gaming. I tend to watch like Nerdrotic and various others like that, like movie talk, or like pop culture talk and stuff like that. But I get it, having it on in the background, and like I said, I'm not opposed to that. Moved up a couple of places now from 5th, which ain't bad. I'm definitely going to have to edit the audio on the coughs, but they'll be easy to see on the timeline. Just a massive bar going off the edge of the screen. So 5th up to 3rd. Obviously I'm not going to come first, which is interesting to see that the AI is more of a challenge than in usual career mode, so that's good, I guess. As long as you're not bothered by not winning all the time. And like I said before, kind of like what I mentioned about not caring about being the fastest in the world. I'm nowhere near. I'm well aware of that. I'm the first to admit it, and I've said it so many times. And I think in some ways that probably makes me, an interesting alternative to, not all channels, but most channels tend to be people who watch because the driver is good, you know, like a really fast driver. Where I feel like me as a driver, or at least like me on leaderboards, has so little relevance to the stuff that I do on YouTube. I feel like most of you probably don't really care how quick I am, and I doubt most of you have even given it a second thought. And I certainly don't either. Little bit of a mess up at the end there in terms of the racing line, but that was a fine enough race. I think I ended up, quicker in the race itself than I did in qualifying anyway, which ain't bad. So, the completionist in me hates the idea that I might progress without coming first every time. I remember on that note, my old man back in the Gran Turismo 4 days, he was obsessed with having a 100% win ratio, which obviously back against the AI, that was a different time and that was a lot easier. For the most part, there were certainly exceptions to that, but he used to take it to the extreme where if he was even close to losing a race, he would just turn the PS2 off, turn it on again, and go from the last save to keep it at 100%. I was never that bothered, really. So 3rd place, I'm assuming that the total count up of stars is going to be more important toward the end. I guess I could also use something like a Camaro retroactively, earn less cash maybe, but have a better chance of winning to get the stars, so that's an interesting way. Maybe for the next one, I think I might try now. So that progresses through to there. Okay, so interesting. So it's not just muscle-based. So muscle leads to more muscle, leads to a roulette ticket. Oh, okay, cool. I mean, it'll probably be like 10 grand, knowing my luck. And then it's got the Beetle, which is interesting, and then you actually win the Beetle. Okay, cool. So up here, Corvette, yeah, that's a bit more on brand with the Corvette. And then drifting, I mean, it's got Mustangs and stuff, so I guess, yeah, I could see that in a general sense, going from like the American route or muscle route. Don't really see how the Beetle fits in there, but I guess Dune Buggy, that seems a bit of a vague thing. Let's try something else. So we've got Porsche Cup, the FF Battle, Civic, and the Peugeot GTI. Where shall we go next? Maybe Porsche Cup. Yeah, Porsche Cup, I reckon. Oh, and it's at the GP course. Okay. 6.7, 6.5, 6.3. Well, now that is more what I'm kind of talking about. If you want it to be more of a challenge, then yeah, that is more like having an extra challenge for extra cash. Not like a Mach 40. That's still a mid-engine, whatever engine was in that Ford GT or whatever with just a Mustang body on it. I'd consider a classic Carrera that's modified up to the same level as a GT3. That sounds a bit more challenging to me. Which one do I want, though? Let's go to the other extreme. Let's go to this one. And see the difference that this makes. How long have we been recording for? It's about 20 minutes. That's not too bad. We've only done one race, mind you. but, eh. Practice starting. Yeah, okay. We get the idea. We know what practice is. I think moving forward, I'll probably do less and less practice. Because when you've got to qualify anyway, it gets a bit of a waste of time. So I'll just get a bit of a feel for the 911. It's a good car anyway, we all know that. See what kind of grip we're working with, what the brakes are like. It's got sport soft tyres, so that's a hell of a thing anyway. It's ironic for someone who loves the Nürburgring so much, specifically the Nordschleife, that I really don't like the GP course. I've never liked this track. I don't like anything about it. To me, it has none of the character. It's boringly short in comparison, and consequently, for me at least, extremely repetitive. And for some reason, I end up racing on this track a lot in games like Ride, which I hate even more on a bike. But woe is me, I know. I tell you what, if we're going to have short versions of iconic tracks, where's the Bugatti circuit of Le Mans? Come on, Polyphony. What are we doing? Even Forza got rid of that after a while. It's a shame. And you can't give me all that, well, it doesn't technically exist anymore. I don't even know in the case of the Bugatti circuit, but you can't even say stuff like that anymore because we literally just had the Espace F1 in the game, and there's no way they let them drive that. So the physics are, at best, a best guess as to how that car performs in the game. And more so, Forza just brought back, what was it, the Mazda Furai? I think it was, which literally doesn't exist anymore because it burned to the ground, and they've just brought that car back. So, yeah, of course they could have something like the Bugatti circuit. You could bring back, like, Brooklands or something like that and have it, like, with the grass grow in between, or have a completely mint version of the track. So, yeah, get creative. Who cares if the track doesn't exist anymore? Give it your best guess. Right, I'm going to leave it there for the practice. No! I'm going to leave it there. And we're going to skip. And then we're going to go to qualification. Blah, 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 blah. We know. If you've downloaded a £25 DLC into this game, chances are you probably know what qualifying is. It almost seems like, you know that little anecdote that I think most of us know at this point about Kaz when Gran Turismo 1 was being developed, that he had to be kind of reined in because he was going to make the game too difficult for people, like for beginners. They wouldn't have a clue what they were doing. It almost seems like out of spite or something, it goes the opposite way now, where it explains everything to you. But hey. And after all that explaining and all of those demos and helpful hints and tips and tricks, it's still Forza Horizon 5 that wins the most accessible Game of the Year award. you gotta find the irony of that quite funny. GT3 is definitely one of those cars that I'd like to drive in real life as well. Because I've reviewed a few 911s on the channel in Beards and Cars, but all of the ones that I drove were Carreras in one form or another. Carrera 2s, Carrera 4s, Carrera S. Absolutely superb cars, and to this day, the 997.2 Carrera S, I believe it was, one of the best handling cars I've ever driven, and one of the most enjoyable driving experiences I've ever had. Awesome car to drive. And again, it feels like one of those cars which I would describe it as having exactly the right amount of power for what it needs. And obviously there are way more powerful versions, way quicker versions. One of the 911s I would like to drive the most is, well, technically not that era, but the 997.1 in effect, Turbo. That's still my favourite 911 Turbo. I just think it seems like such a really nicely balanced car in terms of its spec. 480 horses, looks fantastic. Not too crazy on price for a while. I don't know about now, they might have gone crazy. But back around like when the R35 GTR kind of came out, and there were some really, really cool modern icons that came out around that time. R35, the first generation Audi R8 with the 4.2 V8, the 997 Turbo, some really cool stuff. Fairly soon after the Ferrari 599, it was a hell of a time. And now, yeah, cars have gotten quicker, but more boring. Ferrari F80, for example. Don't know what you guys' thoughts on that is, but I couldn't be any less whelmed. Ferrari seems to have mastered the art of making cars that look like they should be electric, even when they're not. And to me, the F80 looks like that. It looks like an electric hypercar. I think I'd have been more excited if they'd have added a Purisang to the game than a 296, to be honest. Keep the GT3 car, that's cool, because, you know, for those who are clamouring for more GT racing stuff, that's a great choice to go for, I think. More would be better, of course, but that was better than nothing. But for the road car, I mean, if you're a fan of the 296, honestly, what does it bring to Ferrari's lineup that you can't do with other Ferraris already? It's got the hybrid system. I guess that's kind of different, but so does a LaFerrari. I don't know, I'd rather have like a 360 Challenge Stradale in the game, you know, like a raw analog Ferrari. But hey. So, 135, I'm going to leave it there, and once again, let's see how this pans out. Let's speed up the B-spec. Drop down to third. Not bad, not bad. So I've dropped down to third instead of dropped down to fifth. Would be interesting if I picked the other one. Would I drop down to fourth? So we got like 3, 4, or 5 on the grid. Still third for the moment. Like I said, I don't really care if I'm not first on the grid. So far, for my, like, first impressions... Oh, we've dropped to fourth? No! For my first of the first impressions, I would say... none of this needed to be a DLC. Maybe things change further on, but this is just career mode stuff. It's a more in-depth version of it, but, you know... That's kind of like someone saying, you know, someone putting handcuffs on and going, I can't move. Like, yeah, you just put the handcuffs on yourself. They chose not to do this in career mode usually, so now this seems like it's different, but only because they didn't already do it. You could have easily had stuff like this in there. And then sometimes people will try and be apologetic for that by saying, yeah, but people wouldn't stick around for that. They'd get bored, you know, the 5-minute attention span. If people have got that kind of attention span, they're not going to be driving in career mode in the first place. They're just going to jump into an online lobby and, you know, fart about with their friends. So, it's a straw man argument. If you're going to make a real racing game, do it. Especially when, as I said earlier on, games like Tokka Race Driver 3, Enthusia, various others took it more seriously years ago. Beep, 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 beep. GT3 RS. But yeah, like I said, I really would love to, I mean, wouldn't we all? I'd love to check out an RS. Which one would I want to drive? I think, funnily enough, probably the same era, the 997 GT3. I'd really like to review one of those. I'd definitely choose a turbo over it, because even without driving it, I already know the turbo is more my kind of thing. In real life, I really like cars that are more, kind of, I guess relaxed might be a way I might describe it. Like cars which don't necessarily do the work for you. There is a bit of that with the turbo or a GTR, and I wasn't a huge fan of the Nissan GTRs that I drove. Fast, but kind of forgettable, to be honest. But in the case of the 911, I feel like it's the usability, which I like. The fact that you've got that four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, depending on the vehicle, you can actually put the power down. I literally never do track days, regardless of what car I'm driving, so track experience and track capabilities of a GT3 don't mean that much to me. I'd like to experience a GT3 because it is such a benchmark of a car, and for that more raw experience, but I'm almost certain that I would prefer the turbo. I'm almost certain I prefer the turbo because it's just more accessible. It's more of a real-world car. It's the kind of thing where as long as you can afford the fuel and the insurance, you could probably use it every day. I mean, I tell you what, a 911 Turbo probably gets better fuel economy than my daily does. I got a V8, a Lincoln Navigator, as my daily. I average about 17 to the gallon out of that thing. So I feel like a 911 Turbo would probably be getting 22, 24, something like that. But yeah, GT3, it's one of those you have to drive it at some point kind of cars, you know? How Clarkson back in the day said about Alfa Romeos. Every petrolhead's got to try it at least once. Yeah, sure. I can get behind that. I feel like a GT3 is a similar kind of thing. And a chap that's got a used dealership that I haven't worked with for a while, but I did loads of reviews with him in Beards and Cars, and a bunch of cars that I've owned were because of cars that I drove with him, including the Golf R32. I drove the Range Rover SVR of his, and that was an awesome bit of kit. Car of the Year material in many cases. He absolutely adores, or at least last time I spoke to him, absolutely adores the GT3 RS. And I think it was, I can't remember if he had a GT3 RS or a GT3. It was the one with the active wing. I think it was the 991 generation, or maybe 992. It was one of those two. But it had the active rear wing, so I think it might have been an RS. I don't recall it. But he said that was just incredible to drive, even on the road. But he's a track day kind of guy. If you look back through Beards and Cars, I did a review of the MGZS, the four-door saloon with, I think it was the V6 one, I think he had, something like that. I can't remember now. But he'd bought that car, and a bunch of his mates had bought other ones as well, and it was just to go and do track days. So they were like stripped out, suede steering wheel, all that kind of thing. And yeah, so for someone like him, totally see the appeal of a GT3, you know, full roll cage wing, all that kind of fun stuff, yeah. And I have no doubt that I'd enjoy a track day. It's kind of like my thoughts on Gran Turismo in VR, because another question that I get asked, probably one of the more common questions that people ask me, is have I tried Gran Turismo VR, or do I have a PSVR 2? And I always say no. And I'm not opposed to it, I just, for the moment, I don't care enough for VR in any form, not just Gran Turismo, to bother paying that kind of money for it. And I also find, from what I've seen, Gran Turismo doesn't suffer from this as much. Any racing game doesn't really, because you're sat in the car by definition. But the idea of buying it just to play one game, I really don't like that. More to the point though, VR to me will get a lot more interesting when it gets a bit more like Ready Player One-ish. And I know there are like omnidirectional pads that you can stand on and all that kind of stuff, which is cool. But when we get to that point, then as some of you know, I'm a massive Fallout fan, and I love Fallout 4. It's my most replayed game. And if I could play Fallout 4 and actually roam the map, actually walk around Boston with a VR headset on, now you're talking. No, that's really, really fun stuff then. Especially in a game like Fallout where you're not a superhuman, with mods obviously, but like the jump height for example, you can't jump that high in that game. So if you actually jumped on a tracking pad, it would kind of work, because you only jump a little bit in the game anyway. And if you run or walk, it would have different speeds. Crouching down, you'd actually have to crouch. Stuff like that, that's when, you know, that is one game, funnily enough, which I would get VR for. But then at that point, I could justify it more, because then I've got this massively enjoyable personal experience of Fallout 4, and then I'd have the bonus as well of finally playing Gran Turismo in VR. And I've said to, or not I've said to people have said to me, I should say, about borrowing their VR headsets and stuff to try it out, which I appreciate, but again, I don't care enough to try it. And there's no point in reviewing it now, because, you know, we're so far out from when that was a new idea that nobody cares for a review anymore. But yeah, I'm sure I'll get around to it eventually. Or aside from Fallout, if it was something like, and I don't really know how you could ever do this properly, because the gameplay doesn't really lend itself toward it unless you're like a parkour enthusiast or an Olympic gymnast. But if it was something like Arkham Knight in VR, and I know there is a VR Batman game, but it's just like basically a crime scene where you're just looking at stuff, you know, fixed in one place as you often are with VR. And like I said, I don't even know how you could do that game in VR properly, because it's not like you can be strapped in and flying around. And it's part of the problem that Kaz has got, really, if you think about it. It's just a different version of the same problem that he's got with the Tourist Trophy 2, which sucks, because his problem with it is that, according to him, the rigs just aren't good enough yet to have like a realistic motorcycle experience. I think that is such bunk, because it's a game, first and foremost. And of course, so many of us would enjoy a Tourist Trophy 2. We don't need a little set of handlebars to be sat in front of us to enjoy a game. That's rubbish. And I just hate that it's being held back for that one foible. It's so stupid to me. And especially when you compare it to stuff like, okay, you care that much about realism, then why is there so much of a focus on completely fictional, totally unrealistic Vision GT cars? And I don't just mean the obvious choice of a 440 mile an hour Tomahawk, which, good luck turning a corner at that speed on a road, and yes, I'm aware of fighter jets pulling manoeuvres like that, but most people who are playing the game are not fighter jet pilots or Formula 1 drivers, so we shouldn't have a chance of piloting a Tomahawk, and yet look how many players can put down great laps with Tomahawks just from playing a game, because you don't have any of the realism that would actually be at play there, like the G-force pulling you all over the place, or throwing your guts up when you drive a car like that, because you're just not toned, conditioned, and built for it, you know? Like a fighter pilot would be. So don't talk to me about realism, because again, it's like with this kind of structured racing, either go all in, or don't. Don't, you know, fiddle fart around in between, trying to claim the high ground of being the real racing simulator or the real driving simulator, as Gran Turismo always has, while simultaneously having 330 mile an hour Alfa Romeos and ridiculous Tomahawks and cars which, you know, electric vehicles which, it's not so much that you can't recharge them in the pit lane, that's fine, but the fact that their fuel or battery lasts such a short time, again, that's not realistic either. In some cases it is. But you can't sit on the fence as far as realism. Either go all in or stop pretending like you're going all in. And this just kind of feels to me like an extension of that idea. Like, oh, look at this extra experience. Oh, so you're admitting that the base game wasn't the actual real driving simulator then? Because this, according to you, is the next thing. Even though this is what other games have been doing for quite some time. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like in order for this video to not end up being too long, at least for a first episode, and we could do long episodes moving forward if you'd like to see that, I might leave it there for first impressions. Now, what I'm planning to do moving forward is obviously to cover this either way. Either in like one-to-one timeline-wise, as this one is, with minimal editing, or I could do cut-down versions. To be honest, I don't really see what there would be to cut down. I guess I could cut entire races out if they're not that interesting, but then that kind of defeats the point of doing the Let's Play idea, so I think this is probably the best format to go for, but let me know your ideas down below. And I think what I'm planning to do is probably release the reviews for the new cars in GT7 165 or Spec 3 on every other day, and then these videos every other day until we've covered all 8 cars and the DLC. The DLC, I would imagine, will take significantly longer than 8 days, so the car reviews will be done first. But yeah, that's the rough idea that I've got at the moment. So today, and then tomorrow will be a review of one of the new cars, then this again the day after, and then, as usual, the members' videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, as usual. I might still do it on weekends moving forward, we'll have to see. Like I said, I'm busy outside of YouTube, so we'll have to see on that front. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there for this first episode. Let me know what you think of this style of having the, picture-in-picture doing it in real time, kind of like live streaming, but without the disadvantages of live streaming, so you don't have to join and feel like you're late to something, because it's just a video. But yeah, let me know. I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.